Hey Playas, how you dern? Welcome back to Playas Guide. On this episode of Playas Guide, I'm going to be discussing some of the most rarest and valuable and some uncommon underrated games on the Sega Genesis. So if you're a video game collector or a retro gamer, you're going to want to subscribe to this channel because there is a bunch of videos already uploaded about video game collecting and retro games. I also like to play games too, so I do some videos where I recommend different games that I think you should check out across various platforms and various styles. So let's get right to it. The Sega Genesis does have some pretty rare games on it. And I would have to say, and I think it's undisputed, that the rarest game, the rarest Sega Genesis game, is the Blockbuster World Championships 2. So this game was part of a promotion through Blockbuster. It had NBA Jam and Judge Dredd on it, and it was running about the same time as Nintendo had the Super Nintendo competition cartridge with Donkey Kong. And you would go in to a Blockbuster during 1995 and play around to this game, submit your score, and I guess hopefully advance to the finals or win a prize. Now, the Sega Genesis was not quite as popular as the Super Nintendo. Many of us already know this, and because of that, there are less cartridges. It's speculated that there are less of these cartridges floating around than there are the Donkey Kong competition cartridge, which isn't really that hard to believe. These weren't in every Blockbuster, but they were in many of the larger Blockbusters in larger cities. So it is definitely the hardest Genesis game to come across. Next rare game for the Sega Genesis is the Blockbuster Game Factory. And there's a green and a blue. So the green is a little bit harder to find than the blue. Now, both of these games are not necessarily going to be considered part of a licensed Genesis library, just like the World Championship 2 cartridge. That's fine, but they're still going to top the list because you don't see these very often at all. Now, how these cartridges worked is they were essentially flashing games onto the cartridges so you could play whatever game you wanted to play, whether they had it in stock or not. They would just flash it to the cart, and away you go, you're gaming. So by far, the rarest game of the licensed Sega Genesis Collection is Outback Joey. And this game was packaged with the Heartbeat Personal Trainer. And this is similar to the Nintendo's Exertainment Cycle for the Super Nintendo. And the only way you could get this game was if you bought the Heartbeat Personal Trainer. It was packaged with it. And it is believed that there is 1,000 or less of these that were actually produced. So in existence today, the number is far greater than that. And you're really looking at collectors who've held on to this and tracked them down early on, who are the ones who are going to have it. So this game is going to go for a premium. Rest of the Sega Genesis library isn't necessarily in order of rarity exactly, because some of these games are just super popular and uncommon, and that has really driven the price up, and the availability also is not there because of the high demand. Next one I got here is Crusader of Sentri. So this is kind of, a lot of people looked at it as a Zelda ripoff, so it didn't get the best reviews because it's not as good as Zelda, but it isn't a bad game. It's still a pretty good game, and it's an uncommon one. But like I said, it is highly sought after because it's not a bad game, just not as good as Zelda. And when compared to Zelda, which it was at the time, the reviews weren't the best, so sales also weren't so good. Next is Musha. Now, I think most people already know about this game. This is one of the best shoot 'em ups ever made, and because of that, and because it's uncommon, The demand for this game is through the roof, and guess what the price tag is too now? It's The Punisher. So this is a game based off of an arcade game that came out about a year before, and it was subpar in many ways. It had not so good sound and not so good graphics, even for the Genesis. But a lot of people do think that it is still a pretty good game, or even a hidden gem, if you will. And that definitely has created some demand for it. Another thing that it had some issues with was that the game was censored. So the original arcade version, for many game snobs, is the version to play, and this version is inferior. Miracle Piano Teaching System. So this game really didn't sell well at all. And the fact that Miracle Piano was also available on the NES and the Super Nintendo and the PC, and I think there was a couple other more obscure systems you could get it on. And the piano, I don't think actually ever played music in game. It just taught you how to play. I mean, who really wanted this game? Not many. And the Miracle Piano wasn't cheap either. Beggar Prince. Now this is a game, I don't even know if it really belongs on this list, because the game was released in 1996, but not in North America. We got a North American release in 2013. So it was the last commercial release for the Sega Genesis since 1998. And, you know, I don't know how I feel about this one. Does it belong on this list? If you want to leave it out, that's cool. You want to include it, I think that's cool too. So, you know, this one's kind of up in the air. But like I said, the Sega Genesis, a lot of these games, there's a lot that are underrated and maybe don't have the attention of some of the games that I've named that could very well be lower in print run and quantities. They're just, right now, there's not as much of a demand for them. But I'll list some of those right after I get done these top 10. Mega Turrican was not initially intended for the Sega Genesis. I think it was going to be on the Amiga or something. But anyways, Data East picked this game up, and after a few production delays, it eventually got released on the Sega Genesis. And a lot of times when games are delayed because of production, they lose a bit of steam and hype upon their release, and, you know, they don't often sell as well. I mean, this is a pretty cool game too, so again, the demand factor comes into play here. But yeah, it's a rare one and it's hard to get. Skeleton Crew is also another rare game that's hard to get. I really don't see this one very often. Aerobiz Supersonic. This is another rare game for your Sega Genesis, and this game was released first on the Super Nintendo, so Nintendo had the upper hand. If you were into flight, airport simulation games, whatever you want to call this one, well, then, you know, you probably want to play this. But there was also probably a lot of kids that weren't really interested in it either. And if they did, and if they were interested in it, they got to play it on the Super Nintendo first. So Troubleshooter, this is a game that is very good, but not really recognized. Not many people recognize this game or know anything about it, and I think that's why this one kind of flies under the radar a bit and makes it quite rare and falls on to this list. So now I'm going to list off some games that are uncommon or hidden rares that maybe don't get as much attention. Some of them definitely do. Some of them are uncommon games that are just very valuable and in demand, like most of the Sega Genesis games I've mentioned already. Oh, and I'll name off right now, there are also some rare unlicensed games such as Action 52, Spiritual Warfare, and Bible Adventures. So keep an eye out for those. So first up for these uncommon or lesser rare games, you got Splatterhouse 2, Splatterhouse 3, Sparkster, Alicia Dragoon, Castlevania Bloodlines, Elemental Master, Grind Stormer, Time Killers, Mutant League Hockey, Legend of Wukong, Vapor Trial, and Wings of War. There's still many other Genesis games that are uncommon or expensive, but I'm not going to list everything on this video, but there are some definite games that you should keep an eye out for that I have mentioned. If you like the channel, please subscribe and also check out Playas Guide on Twitch. I have an excellent group of highly skilled retro streamers for you to check out there, and the Playas Guide podcast. I'll put a link to that, so if you're at home and you're looking for something to do, or you want something to listen to while you're driving or you work out or whatever you're doing, please check out this podcast. It's all about game collecting and retro games. You can also find Playas Guide Twitter, Instagram, all those places. So wherever you get your gaming and retro gaming, Playas Guide is probably there. Please check us out. But until the next episode, that's it. Later, players.